Hey everybody, this is TJR. If you're new here, welcome to the channel. If not, welcome back. And while this series did come out roughly about 2 weeks or so ago, I have finally just gotten around to watching the very first episode of Netflix adaptation of The Sandman. And I want to weigh in and give my thoughts on this first episode. I felt very strongly about it. So, first of all, you should know that I'm familiar with the source material. I read the original Sandman comic during its original 75-issue run. It was a comic series that other comic creators who didn't work for DC Comics, who published the series, would go out of their way to praise. It was a comic book, or I should say, it was a story about stories. Back when it premiered, I will say that it was a very bold step at the time for DC Comics to have a mature title like this within the continuity of their regular DC Comics universe. This series pushed the boundaries of what a mainstream comic could be. And it was honorable of DC to respect Neil Gaiman's wishes, I hope I said his name correctly, and let him end the series when he felt it was appropriate to do so. Now, of course, they did publish a lot of spin-offs, and they still publish trade paperbacks and keep the series out there, which I'm glad that they do. Now, before I begin my review of the Netflix adaptation, I want to first just state that I did try to listen to the Amazon Prime audio play adaptation of the book. And I have to say that I found myself unable to complete it, which surprised me. This was a faithful adaptation of the comic book, but I found myself being bored by their adaptation, and I honestly felt it wasn't translating over to this other medium very well. And I thought to myself, this doesn't bode well for the live action series that at the time was still in production. Then I saw the trailers for the Netflix series, and I have to admit, those didn't do a whole lot for me either. I thought the trailers were just kind of blasé. Then I saw the advanced clip that adapted issue 8 of the comic series entitled The Sound of Her Wings, and I definitely had some issues with it. So it was with a certain amount of trepidation that I finally sat down and watched episode 1. Honestly, I was completely taken by surprise at how good I thought this episode was. By the end of episode 1, I felt completely hooked. And I looked at Superfan and I said to her, I can't wait to see the rest. One of the key reasons why I think this adaptation worked so well, and you're going to be surprised to hear me say this, is because it excised a large portion of the DC Universe comic book elements from the series. Yeah, I just said that. From the very beginning, the original series was deeply rooted in the DC comic book universe. And before this Netflix adaptation came out, I remember thinking to myself, how much of the DC Universe elements will they keep and what will they get rid of? Will John Constantine be in the series? Will the Justice League or the Demon Etrigan? Based on this episode, the answer appears to be mostly not. And I have to say, this adaptation is stronger for it. When author Neil Gaiman first pitched the Sandman series to DC, deconstructing and rebooting older DC characters was a thing. Sandman was pitched as a deconstructionist reboot of the original Golden Age Sandman comic book superhero from the 1940s. And in this adaptation, all references to the Golden Age Sandman were completely removed. And seeing it now, in my opinion, proves just how unnecessary all these tie-ins to the DC continuity were to the story that Neil Gaiman was writing. Looking at this first episode, I see the Sandman series in a whole new light. And honestly, now I suspect The reason Neil Gaiman added all these DC Universe tie-ins to the series is because he knew he had to in order for the book to have a chance at commercial success. I love DC Comics. I grew up reading all this intercontinuity, but I really feel now that most of it was unnecessary within the pages of this series. DC and Marvel comic fans are very invested in the intercontinuity universe that both of these publishers use to both deepen their respective universes and to sell more books. Neil Gaiman may have been given a mandate by DC Comics to add enough in-continuity references in order to interest the DC Comics fan base. But I would venture to guess that Neil Gaiman didn't really need to be told to do that. I think he knew as a professional that more comic fans would give the book a chance if they knew the book tied into the larger universe than if it didn't. So therefore, he made sure that it did. And he did a great job of it. He did such a great job that I didn't realize how unnecessary all these DC Universe references were for the series, including the Golden Age character that was the basis for the entire pitch. Now, looking ahead, I already know that John Constantine is not in this adaptation. That's kind of a shame. I love that character, and I really wish that the Constantine TV series that was on CBS had gotten another chance on streaming TV after it was canceled. Are you listening, Netflix? I think you should do this. I do see that they are keeping the characters of Cain and Abel, and I can see why, and even Dr. D, but I will guess that they won't even mention that he is a Justice League villain. But after this episode, I really do think that this series is much stronger for excising the majority of these DC Universe references. The level of deep DC continuity that was in the original comic series can only really appeal to hardcore comic book fans, which is really the only kinds of fans that DC and Marvel Comics have right now. With that said, the majority of humanity are not DC comic fans. And I think that all DC references would just confuse, not to mention bore, the larger part of the audience. Outside of all these DC Universe references, though, I think this adaptation remains amazingly faithful. It's just a leaner and meaner version now. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours if you've seen this. If you've watched the entire series, please don't give me any spoilers. But I'm curious to know your thoughts. And maybe I will come back, talk about the other episodes, or maybe I'll just wait till I'm done and talk about the entire series. Let me know what you think of that as well. As always, if you like what I do here, be sure to hit like, hit subscribe, and hit the bell notification icon so you never miss a video. Right now, I want to give a big thank you to my patron supporters. Patron supporters receive exclusive weekly videos not available here on the channel. If you'd like to be a patron supporter, go to patreon.com/TJR, the original. Mostly, I want to thank you all for just stopping by, and I want to thank you for staying to the end of the video. And I hope you all stay safe and healthy. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.